Human behavior is strange, especially when it comes to motivation. This channel is about the quiet patterns in our minds, the things we think about, struggle with, worry about, and sometimes don't fully understand about ourselves. And today I want to talk about something that many people misunderstand about themselves, the idea that they are lazy. Because very often, what looks like laziness on the surface is actually something else entirely, something much quieter and much more uncomfortable: shame. Most people know this feeling. There's something you know you should probably do. Maybe it's sending an email, starting a project, applying for a job, calling someone back, cleaning your apartment. Something relatively simple. And yet, somehow you keep postponing it. You open the laptop and suddenly remember you should check something else first. You tell yourself you will do it tomorrow or next week or when you feel more ready. And the strange thing is, the longer you wait, the heavier the task begins to feel. Eventually, something that would have taken 10 minutes starts feeling like a mountain. From the outside, this behavior looks like procrastination. But psychologically speaking, something much more interesting is happening. Human beings rarely avoid things for no reason. Avoidance is usually a protective response. It happens when the brain believes that a situation might produce an uncomfortable emotional experience: rejection, failure, embarrassment, disappointment, or perhaps the most powerful one of all: shame. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, there's something wrong with me. And the brain is extremely motivated to avoid situations that might trigger that feeling. Many tasks that people procrastinate on have a hidden psychological risk attached to them. Sending an application means someone might reject you. Sharing an idea means someone might criticize it. Starting a project means discovering you might not be as good as you hoped. And for many people, that possibly carries a quiet emotional threat. Not just the possibility of failure, but the possibility of feeling exposed, which means the brain does something surprisingly logical. It avoids the situation. This is also why advice like just be more disciplined often doesn't work very well. Discipline is useful when the problem is effort, but avoidance driven by shame isn't about effort. It's about emotional protection. Imagine telling someone to just be disciplined about touching a hot stove. Their brain isn't avoiding the stove because they lack discipline. Their brain is avoiding the stove because it believes touching it will hurt. When tasks become emotionally threatening, the brain reacts in a very similar way. It creates distance, distraction, delay, anything that allows you to avoid the uncomfortable experience. The frustrating part is that avoidance often creates its own cycle. You delay something, then you feel guilty about delaying it. Then the task feels even heavier the next time you think about it. And slowly something small begins to accumulate emotional weight. A simple email becomes the email. A small task becomes something you mentally walk around for weeks. And at some point, people begin explaining this pattern to themselves in a very harsh way. They say things like, I'm just lazy. I have no discipline. I'm terrible at finishing things. But that explanation misses something important. Laziness usually feels comfortable. Avoidance rarely does. Real laziness is surprisingly relaxed. If someone is generally lazy, they are usually not particularly stressed about it. They are not lying awake at night thinking about all the things they should be doing. They are not carrying constant guilt about unfinished tasks. Avoidance, on the other hand, often feels exhausting. You are thinking about the thing you are avoiding all the time. You feel the pressure, you feel the discomfort. You just can't seem to start, which is a very different psychological experience from laziness. There's also an important distinction between avoidance and depression. Depression often involves a broader loss of energy and motivation across many areas of life. Things that used to feel meaningful no longer do. Even simple activities can feel overwhelming. Avoidance tends to be more specific. Certain tasks become unusually difficult to start, not because they require physical effort, but because they carry emotional risk. The risk of confirming a fear about yourself, the risk of not being good enough, the risk of discovering something you would rather not know. And so the brain quietly tries to protect you by postponing the moment of truth. The strange irony is that avoidance often protects us from an emotion that would probably pass much faster if we simply faced the situation. Rejection hurts, but it usually hurts for a moment. Embarrassment feels uncomfortable, but it rarely lasts forever. Avoidance, on the other hand, can stretch that discomfort across weeks, months, sometimes years, not because the task itself is difficult, but because the mind keeps replaying the emotional risk. One helpful shift is to change the question we ask ourselves. Instead of asking, "Why am I so lazy?" A more useful question might be, "What feeling am I trying to avoid?" That question opens a very different perspective. Sometimes the answer is fear or failure. Sometimes it's fear of judgment. Sometimes it's the fear of discovering that something you care about might not work out. And once you see that emotional layer, the behavior starts making a lot more sense. Human behavior often looks simple from the outside, but internally it's usually shaped by invisible emotional forces. What appears to be laziness may actually be fear. What looks like procrastination may actually be self protection. And sometimes the most helpful step isn't forcing yourself to push harder, it's understanding what your mind is trying to protect you from. Because once you understand that, the task itself often becomes much less intimidating. I'm curious whether you've ever noticed this in your own life. A situation where you thought you were being lazy, but later realized you were actually avoiding something that felt emotionally uncomfortable. If you enjoy conversations about psychology, mental health, and the strange patterns in the way our minds work, you might enjoy this channel. Usually, I post a new video about once a week. And if that sounds interesting to you, feel free to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.